Hey Absol-lites, you probably know this, but there's a set of self-enforced rules for Pokemon games designed to make them harder, known as a Nuzlocke. The rules for this challenge are as follows. 1. You can only catch the first Pokemon that you run into on each route. If a Pokemon faints, it is considered dead, and it must be either released immediately or boxed forever as soon as you can. And, lastly, you must nickname all of your Pokemon so that you get more attached to them. Some people, mostly people who do a lot of Nuzlockes, skip this rule. Looking at you, Pokemon Challenge's best Nuzlocker in the world, with over 3,000 hours of Nuzlocke experience. But if you do that, you're doing it wrong. I've never done a Nuzlocke, and finished it anyway. But I've watched quite a few on YouTube, and the point of them isn't just to make the game harder, they're to make you use Pokemon that you wouldn't otherwise, and to get super attached to them. There are also a few other rules that a lot of people use. 1. The Shiny Clause, making it so that if you encounter a shiny Pokemon, even if it's not the first encounter of the area, you can catch it, because come on, it's shiny! The Duplicate Clause, making it so that if you run into a Pokemon as your first encounter, but it's a Pokemon you already have, you can skip it and catch another. Battle Style has to be on set, making it so that you have to take a turn to switch Pokemon, rather than being able to switch with them, because that makes it harder. Though, for this rule, as just an FYI, I actually forgot to do this until a little bit after Misty, so just bear with me on this for a bit. No items in battle, obviously. People do that for regular runs as well. I'm actually only partially doing this one. I don't want anyone to go down if I can avoid it. I get really attached to my Pokemon, so I will use healing items, but X items are broken as heck, so I'm not going to use them. I don't even use X items in regular gameplay, they just make the game too easy. Lastly, if you ever lose a battle, all of your Pokemon faint, as MandJTV put it, it's over, you suck, go home! Now that we've gotten all of that stuff out of the way, we are starting the game. By the way, like I do for my challenge runs, I'm writing the script for this as I go, so this part is written before I start. Let me know if you think I can win or not. I think I can probably win, but if I get too attached to my Pokemon and can't keep going after losing someone, I might just give up. The starter I pick is Squirtle, simply because it's the only candidate starter that I've never used on a playthrough. I name it Donatello, take a guess why. I consider trying to reset for a good nature and stats and everything, but I figured that for a Nuzlocke, the starter is too special to do that. The first rival battle was simple, and since I, like most people, don't count the Nuzlocke to have started until you get Pokeballs, it doesn't really matter. Also, as you can see, I named the rival Pickles. Not really sure why, it just kinda popped into my head. I got my first encounter on Route 1, a Rattata that I named Stuart, after Stuart Little, a movie that I think was based on a book featuring a mouse as the main character. I know mice and rats are technically different, but whatever. I'm not gonna skip out on an encounter, so I caught the next team member right away on Route 22, the one just east of Viridian. It was a Mankey that I named George, after Curious George, the main character of a book and TV series of the same name that is ironically really good, Fight Me! I checked my team summaries and found out that George is actually female, but whatever. There are a lot of back-to-back encounters, but I get my next team member on Route 2, a Pidgey that I named Pidge, after a character from Voltron. Yes, I know that in the Netflix reboot Legendary Defender, Pidge is a girl, and this Pidgey's a guy, but Legendary Defender is a reboot of the 80s and 90s show, where Pidge is a guy, so it still works. It should be time for Brock now, but since this is my first Nuzlocke, and I really do not want to lose my starter for the first gym battle of the game, I did a bit of grinding, and got Donatello up to level 13, at which point he learned Water Gun. I got a crit on Geodude, but I doubt it mattered, honestly. His Onix was also an Oko. Battling trainers on the next route, Donatello evolved into Wartortle. Fun. I wasn't recording it for some reason, but in Mount Moon, I was battling anyone I could, and some random trainer's Clefairy took Stuart out with Double Slap. I haven't really gotten attached to any of my Pokemon yet, so that didn't hurt, but it's a shame anyway, to lose someone so early. On the way to Misty, I took the Helix Fossil. I knew that if I didn't say what I took, you'd all ask. Actually, now that I think about it, everyone asks anyway. Comes to good for the YouTube algorithm. With Pidge and George at level 21, and Donatello... What? I didn't script that. I think Donatello was at 23, but you'll see on screen. I didn't script what level Donatello was at. Anyway, I fought Misty, leading with Pidge. I took out Staryu with a couple gusts, but since it didn't do very much to star me, I switched out to Donatello and finished her off with a couple of bites. On to the rival battle just south of Nugget Bridge. He led with Pidgeotto, so I led with mine and beat him in a short mirror battle. Next is Rattata, and I switched to George and took him out with a crit karate chop. Next is Abra, and since it is pretty much a freebie, I took him out with Gust from Pidge. Last is Bulbasaur, and I used Gust to bring it down to red, and another to finish him off. My next encounter was an Oddish that I named James after the odd one's out. Then the encounter on Route 6 was a Meowth that I named Purr, because I couldn't think of a better name. Time for the SSN rifle battle. He always leads with Pidgeotto, so I led with Pidge as well, beating him in another of those mirror battles. Next is Eradicate, so I switched out to George, who could easily OHKO. Next is Kadabra, and he has low physical defense, so I took the risky play and kept George in. Thankfully, I outsped and took him down with Karate Chop. Last is Ivysaur, and I switched to Pidge, hoping to OHKO with Gust. Unfortunately, though, I didn't OHKO, and he used Poison Powder, which had me very worried. Thankfully, it missed, and he was down the next turn. In Diglett's cave, I caught my next Pokemon, a Diglett that I named Dixie, because I couldn't think of anything better. I was grinding to get ready for Surge when James evolved into Gloom, which is fun. George also evolved into Primeape, which is also fun. I don't want to, but I taught Cut to Purr, because he was my only team member who could learn it, and didn't already have a moveset I liked. Now it's time for Lieutenant Surge. I went in with Digsy as my lead, hoping to OHKO a sweep with Dig, despite being a little underleveled. I did just that for his first two. Unfortunately though, Surge's Pikachu had the ability Static, which paralyzed me, so for his Raichu I failed to outspeed, and he kept setting up double team, making Dig miss. I used Magnitude instead, but it kept missing and I kept being fully paralyzed, so I eventually switched out to James. He used Thunder Wave right away, paralyzing me and crippling my speed, so he continued to outspeed me. I eventually poisoned him, and made what I thought was a 300 IQ play. I just realized I completely forgot about this. In my script, I wrote, "Make an Among Us joke here that will totally date this video." Kinda sus of you, Sarge, to be this offensive. Whatever, I've never played Among Us. Switching back to Digsy to absorb an electric move, only for him to use a full heal instead, getting rid of poison. I healed up James and Digsy, then I went out to James and tried setting up Poison Powder a few times. He almost killed James because I wasn't giving it all my attention, so I switched back to Digsy. After doing a little more, I switched, you see where this is going. At a certain point, I accepted that I'd have to sack someone off, so I unfortunately brought in Purr to tank some damage, while I healed my main battlers. After Purr got sacked off, I brought in Digsy and used Magnitude, getting a Magnitude 8, hitting and finishing him off. Finally! Most of the time, if I lose a Pokemon and have ones in the box, I'll switch to a replacement right away. However, all I have in the box are an Ekans with Shed Skin, rather than Intimidate, Caterpie, a Weedle, and a Kakuna, so I just left a spot blank until I could get something that's actually worth a dang. By the way, if I don't mention an area, it's not because I skipped it, it's because either I failed the encounter, or because it was like a Caterpie or something that I won't use. On Route 10 I caught my next team member, at least for now, a Voltorb that I named Voltron. Time for Erica. I led with Pidge, planning to sweep her team with Fly. I did just that for her first two, and while her Vileplume was a little annoying, it went down pretty fast as well. After the fight, Pidge evolved into Pidgeot. Giovanni time. I led with Digsy because I'd been using him to battle all the poison types in Team Rocket, but since Giovanni is the ground leader, I switched out to Donatello. He used Rage, which, while not as bad as it was in Gen 1, is still not a great move, and I took him down the next turn. Next is Rhyhorn, and it was, yet again, an Oko with Water Pulse. Less is Kangaskhan though, and I switched out to George. He used Fake Out, but since I didn't attack anyway, the flinch didn't matter. I used Karate Chop, which annoyingly did less than half, and he used Mega Punch, almost beating me right there. I was on really low health, so I checked the summaries of all my Pokemon, and I decided that because of his high level, high HP, and decent defense, switching to Pidge was the best call while I healed up George. When I brought in George, I used Karate Chop, bringing him down to red, and then he used Mega Punch, bringing me down to 15 health. I knew that I outsped him, so either I'd outspeed and finish him off, or he'd heal this turn. I used Seismic Toss, finishing him off. Time for the Pokemon Tower rival battle. He leads with Pidgeotto, so I led with Pidge myself, doing another of these mirror battles. I took him out with one fly. Next is Water Onix, and since he is part flying, I can't use James, so instead I kept in Pidge and took him out with a few flies. He used Thrash a few times, which had me a bit worried, but he didn't do much with them, and I took him down the next turn. Next is Growlithe, and I switched out to Donatello, Okoing with Water Pulse. Next is Ivysaur, and I switched out to Pidge again, taking him down in one fly. Last is Kadabra, and while I could switch to Donatello and use Bite, he doesn't get stabbed from it, so I decided it best to keep Pidgeotto in and abuse Kadabra's steaming garbage defense. I did just that, and Oko'd with Fly. While I was battling trainers in the Pokemon Tower, Donatello evolved into Blastoise. Is that normal? There's so many runs where I spend all my time over-leveled that I don't even know if having a fully evolved starter before the 5th gym is normal or not. Rival Fival time, sub to J-Rose. I accidentally led with Voltron since I'd been switch training him, so I brought out Pidge. I was on low health because I forgot to heal before the fight, so I used a bunch of super potions, but those are kind of outdated and it took a while. After that, I did eventually manage to take him down with a bunch of flies though. Next is Water Onix, and I switched to Donatello to tank a few hits while I healed up Pidge. Water Onix was using Dragon Rage, so I expected him to do so again, so I had to switch to Pidge before he could get fully healed, because I was worried that Water Onix would take down Donatello. A few flies later, he was down. Next is Growlithe, and I switched to Donatello, healed with a few super potions, and then took him down with Water Pulse. Next is Venusaur, and I switched out to James while I healed up Pidge. Once Pidge was healed up, I brought him in and used a few flies to take down Venusaur. Last is Alakazam, and I was out of PP for Fly, so I brought in Digsy and used a couple of Magnitudes to take him down using his hot garbage physical defense. Rival Fival is down. Time for another Giovanni fight. I remembered to lead with Donatello, only to find out that he leads with Nidorino, pure poison type. Because of that, I switched to Digsy, and used Magnitude. I got Magnitude 9, and I took him down. Up next is Kangaskhan, and I switched to George, despite her being 4 levels underleveled, and I prayed that I would outspeed, and he wouldn't just Oko me. Thankfully, both of those happened, and I took him down in a couple turns. Next is Rhyhorn, and I switched to Donatello to take him down with one Water Pulse. Last is Nidoqueen, and I meant to Oko with Water Pulse, but I failed to, and he poisoned me. Thankfully, he went down in a few turns. While I was battling trainers, Voltron evolved into Electrode, which is fun. After grinding all my team up to level 40, with Donatello, Pidge, and Digsy closer to 50, because they were the ones actually doing all the fighting when I switch trained, it's Koga time. I led with Donatello because he is my highest level, and since 3 of his 4 Pokemon have Levitate, I can't use Digsy against most of them. So without a Psychic type, brute forcing with a strong Pokemon is my best shot. I OHKO'd his first Coughing with one Water Pulse. I tried to do the same for his Mug, but I only did about a third, so I switched out to Diggsy. He badly poisoned me. I used Magnitude. I got Magnitude 7. I got him into heal range. He healed. I got Magnitude 8. I followed that up with Slash. I took him down. Sorry if this was a lot. Next was another Coughing, and I switched back to Donatello. One Water Pulse, and this Coughing is down. Last was Wheezy. I took it out with 2 Water Pulses. Koga was down. Blaine time. I led with Donatello to sweep with Surf. I didn't expect it to be necessary, but right off the bat I set up Rain. I have no idea if this was necessary or not, because I one-shot swept his whole team with Surf. Sabrina time. I accidentally led with Pidge because I'd been using him to battle the trainers, but since Kadabra has low physical defense, I didn't switch, used Fly, and OHKO'd him. Next is Mr. Mime, and I used Fly again, but it didn't do much, so I switched out to Donatello. Donatello used Bite, getting her into heal range. She healed, I used a couple more bites, moving on. Next is Venomoth, and I used Surf because it's stronger than Bite and Stab, so it's better than sticking to Bite. Last is Alakazam, and it went down in a couple bites. While I wrote this, I actually realized that I should have stuck with Surf the whole time, because Surf's 95 power times 1.5 from the Stab is stronger than Bite's 60 power times 2 times from being super effective. Leader Giovanni time. I led with Donatello, and I swept his whole team with Surf. Hey, have you ever noticed that most of his team is actually weak to Ground? Ground is one of the few types in the game that doesn't resist itself, and Rock and Poison, the 2 secondary types that are on his team, are both weak to Ground. Just something silly I noticed and I wanted to point out. In Viridian City, I catch my next Pokemon, a Poliwag that I named Polly. Man, I really wished that I had known you could fish here sooner. Time for the rival just west of Viridian City. He led with Pidgeot, but I was accidentally leading with James because I used her to catch Polly. I quickly switched out to Pidge and took him out with a few flies. Next is Rhyhorn, and I switched to Donatello to OHKO with Surf. Next is Venusaur, and I switched out to Pidge to take him out in a couple of flies. Next is Water Onix, and I decided to switch to Voltron, which might not have been the optimal play because I'm underleveled, but I decided it might not even matter. He just used Leer on the turn I came in, and then set up Rain the next turn, so he was down pretty fast. Next is Growlithe, and I switched to Donatello and took him down. Last is Alakazam, and I considered switching to take advantage of his low physical defense, but I opted instead to just use Surf, because it's 95 power and, with the stab boost from the Rain, at double power, it OHKO'd. Unfortunately, in a Victory Road trainer battle, I was speeding up the game, and Voltron got hit a little too hard by a Poliwhirl and went down. I didn't think to record that though, unfortunately, so you just have to trust this image of the party screen, why would I lie? After finishing up Victory Road, I headed to the power plant. I used a max repel so I couldn't get any encounters. I hope you see where this is going. I catch my next Pokemon, Zapdos. I normally wouldn't talk about the battle, but for this one, you should hear it. I led with Diggsy because he is neutral to flying and immune to electric. I used a few slashes, getting him into yellow, and then I switched to James to use Sleep Powder. He got James to low health though, so I used a Hyper Potion before using an Ultra Ball. But then he woke up, and before I could put him back to sleep, he got a high roll on Drill Peck, killing James the Gloom. I switched to Diggsy and I used Cut, bringing him down to low enough health that I thought I could use an Ultra Ball. It failed to, however, and since I couldn't just keep on healing, I switched to George, forgetting that flying beats fighting, and George went down right away. I switched Diggsy back in and just decided what I should have thought of sooner. You know what? The heck with it. This is my run, I just lost 3 team members, I'm gonna use a Master Ball. So I did just that, and I added Zip Zap Zop, the Zapdos, to my team. Oh man, that was brutal. I added Polly the Poliwag and Flabby the Snorlax to my team, but Polly isn't gonna stick around long. I headed to the daycare and biked back and forth for a while, getting him to level 25. Took him out of the daycare, and I used a rare candy to evolve him. Then, I headed to Cerulean to trade him for a Jinx named Zinx. Okay, so here's something that I just need to say. The daycare man is an idiot. Jinx has the move Lovely Kiss. I believe it used to be her signature move. Whether or not it is anymore, I'm not sure. And since grinding by biking back and forth is easier than grinding on people with the Versus Seeker, I put Zinx in the daycare. And now, she no longer has the move Lovely Kiss. So, I am actually going to go to the Sevi Islands and see if I can find the move relearner. I found the move reminder. With Zinx and Donatello at level 60 and everyone else at level 55 movesets on screen, it's time for the Elite Four. First up is Ice Trainer Lorelei. I led with Flabby since he knows Brick Break and fighting is good against ice. First out is Dugong, and I used a few Brick Breaks and it went down. Next is Cloyster, and I tried to do the same thing, and I did eventually succeed, but she got me down to about a third health and set up both Spikes and Hail. Next is Slowbro, and I switched to Zinx, because while it doesn't get stabbed from Shadow Ball, I'm not sure what Lorelei's moveset is, and I didn't want to bring in Zip Zap Zop in case she has ice moves. Slowbro went down pretty fast, but for Lapras I didn't want to bring Flabby back out, so I completely forgot what I had decided for Slowbro, and I switched out to Zip Zap Zop. Thankfully though, Zip Zap Zop is still a legendary, and Lapras went down in a few Thunderbolts. Next is Bruno. He leads with Onix, so I led with Donatello. I used Surf, OHKOing his first Onix. Then, for Hitmonchan, I switched out to Zinx, not knowing that he had Rock Tomb. Rock Tomb brought me to half, but then he outsped and finished off Zinx with a Sky Uppercut before she even got the chance to do anything. Gosh darn it, Bruno. I brought in Zip Zap Zop and I swept his 3 fighting types, then switched back to Donatello and OHKO to Onix, but oh man, at 2, Bruno. Time for Agatha, and if I still had my Psychic type, this would be easy. But I don't, and now it's a nightmare. Pun intended! I led with Flabby because I no longer have super effective moves since all her ghosts have Levitate and her ghost moves can't touch him. I used Flamethrower, she confused me, I healed the confusion with a berry, she confused me again the next turn, I used Flamethrower, I snapped out of confusion, yada yada yada, I got badly poisoned, she got burned. I hit her hard, and she went down to the burn. Next is Golbat, and I switched out to Zip Zap Zop, OHKOing with Thunderbolt. Next is Arbok, and I switched out to Diggsy, OHKOing with Earthquake. Next is Haunter, and I switched out to Flabby, but she used Curse, and I was not about to deal with that, and I switched out to Pidge. Then, she used Mean Look, trapping Pidge. That would have been a really great play if it was the right Pokemon, but instead it's just annoying. I still OHKO'd with Fly anyway though, and last is Gengar. I meant to use Fly, but then she outsped and put Pidge to sleep. Lots of stuff happened that watching the footage back, I can't follow because the game was being sped up, and Pidge went down to poison. I brought Flabby back in and did a lot of stuff, and then eventually I switched out to Zip Zap Zop, and did lots of things that ended up in me switching back to Donatello. Donatello finished her off with a couple of Surfs. Welp, that's 3 Elite Four members down, and 2 of them, so far, have taken out team members. Next is Lance, and I led with Zip Zap Zop because he leads with Water Onix. I did OHKO with 1 4-time super effective Thunderbolt. Next is Aerodactyl, and I opted not to switch, hoping that I'd be able to OHKO with Thunderbolt. But somehow, he outsped me, got me down to half with Ancient Power, and got the Omni Boost. Come on! And I didn't even OHKO, only managing to do about 2/3. Since he outsped, and he'd gotten a speed boost so it couldn't even be a speed tie anymore, I switched out to Donatello. 1 Ancient Power took me down to yellow, but then 1 Surf took him down to 0. Next is Dragonair, and I used Ice Beam to bring him down to red, then he paralyzed me. Stuff happened, he used Outrage, he got confused, he hurt himself, he went down. Next is another Dragonair, so I used Ice Beam again, once again, getting him into red, he got me into red, he got confused from Outrage, I used a Super Potion because I only had one Hyper Potion left. Unfortunately, I misjudged what he'd do, and he healed instead of attack, so I had to use my last Hyper Potion. He did attack the next time that happened, he hit himself in the face, we're on to Dragonite. I was fully paralyzed and he got me into red, so I switched to Flabby, who took him out with a few body slams. Now, we're finally at the end. Champion Pickles. I led with Zip Zap Zop, knowing that he leads with Pidgeot. Thunderbolt didn't Oko Pidgeot, unfortunately though. He healed, I used Drill Peck, then he switched to Rhydon, voiding my Thunderbolt. Huh, that's actually a weirdly high-level play for the AI to make. Brought in Digsy and used Earthquake, doing about half, but then he took Digsy down with an Earthquake of his own. I brought in Donatello to finish the job. Next is Venusaur, and I switched out to Zip Zap Zop while he took in Sunlight. I got him to yellow with Drill Peck, he healed with a berry and fired off Solar Beam. I got him into red, he took in Sunlight, I took him down the next turn. He brought Pidgeot back out, and I took him down in one turn with Thunderbolt. Next is Alakazam. I considered staying in and hoping Drill Peck could do something, but I opted to switch to Flabby because I needed Zip Zap Zop for Water Onix. I got a crit with Body Slam, Okoing Alakazam. By the way, I gave Flabby a Quick Claw to hold, and that's the only reason I outsped. Next is Water Onix, and I used a bunch of Body Slams and then eventually went down. I brought in Zip Zap Zop and finished him off with Thunderbolt. Last is Arcanine, and I tried to use Thunder Wave just in case he didn't use a priority move, because I figured crippling his speed would be best. Unfortunately though, he went for extreme speed. Lastly, I brought out Donatello. Donatello, the OG, made certain that I won this battle. The one who's been with me since the start. The absolute beast of my team. He outsped Arcanine, lived a flamethrower, and got a crit surf, KOing Arcanine even after Pickles healed. I won. Thank you, Donatello. Man, that run was actually surprisingly fun. Yeah, it sucks when you lose a Pokemon and have to grind up the replacement, but it also means you use a Pokemon that you never would have otherwise. My final team was Blastoise, Pidgeot, Dugtrio, Snorlax, Zapdos, and Jynx. With the exception of possibly Pidgeot and Snorlax, I don't think I have ever used any of those Pokemon on a team before. And to me, the point of a Nuzlocke isn't to make it super insanely hard on yourself. The point is to use a Pokemon you've never used before, get attached to them, and maybe also make it a tad more difficult. Anyway, this was fun. Subscribe, ring the bell, you know the drill. Peace out, Absol-lites.